Hello, I welcome you, dear students, in the second part of the lecture based on Midnight Children by Salman Rushdie. Salman Rushdie is undoubtedly one of the most famous novelists in present time. His magnum opus, Midnight Children, received greater critical acclaim and made Rushdie a famous literary figure in English-speaking world. It is a seminal novel, a fairly huge novel. It deals with India's transition from British colonialism to independence and the partition of subcontinent. It is considered an example of post-colonial literature, postmodernist literature, and magic realism. The story is told by its chief protagonist Salim Sinai and is set in the context of actual historical events as with historical fiction. Salim Sinai, the protagonist, the narrator of the story, is telling about his life history as well as the life history of the nation. So it's a Bildungsroman as well as the nation Roman. Midnight Children's importance and significance as a post-colonial text arises from the novel's ability to intertwine three major themes. First, the creation and telling of history. It's very important who is telling the history, the colonizer or the colonized. For an example, in India, the revolt during 1857 is been known as the first war of independence by Indians, by the colonized people, and by the colonizer, by the British, it has been known as a sepoy mutiny. So who is writing history? A king or a common man? A person who is having all power or a marginalized one? A colonizer or colonized? So the interpretation of history gets changed with the people, with the person, the perspective, because the perspective also gets changed. So the novel is dealing the creation and telling of history. Second, the creation and telling of a nation's and an individual's identity. Individual is here Salim Sinai and the nation is his country, India. So how the nation has been born, what are the crises that the nation has faced, and also the experience of an individual, Salim Sinai. The creation and telling of stories, how stories should be written, what are the problems, and when Salim Sinai is narrating his story to Padma, how in between he is breaking the narrative. So telling of history, creation and telling of history, creation and telling of a nation's and individual's identity, the creation and telling of stories. These are the three important themes which are intertwined throughout the novel. Midnight Children is a masterpiece, one of the most widely studied and critically reviewed novels of present time of 20th century. It presents an encyclopedic exploration of entire society through the story of a single person. In order to do this, Rushdie constructs a narrative that is heterogeneous mixture of the different traditions from which it takes its inspiration. In its structure, in the construction of its structure, Rushdie employs a number of different literary techniques and styles in the telling of the Salim's story. It is a post-colonial and postmodernist text. Various techniques and styles make it a rich text as well as a complex text for the interpretation. The postmodernist literature rejects rigid genre distinctions, concept of absolute truth. It favors fragmentation, disorder, ambiguity, multiplicity, subjectivity, paradox, unrealistic, impossible, large, stringent plots, unreliable narrator, pastage, intertextuality, metafiction, self-reflexity, and so on. Let's take here the example of fragmentation, the notion of fragmentation portrayed in the novel or exploited in the novel. All features of this novel, its plot, its narrative, its characterization, all are supported or guided by this spirit of fragmentation. The very identity of Salim Sinai, it is a fractured identity. It is difficult to tell about him who he is, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Christian, brought up by many fathers or father figures, moves in a different nation. So it's very difficult to tell exactly who is Salim Sinai. We talk about his identity, we talk about his body, disintegrated body. It's also been presented in fragmented mode. So fragmentation is there in every part of it. It is a post-colonial text because it rejects the British colonial version of India and constructs a new world and a new depiction of Indian citizens and history in an attempt to provide greater truth to Indian images and Indian history. So the history, the life, the perspectives which the text is presenting from the perspective of the people who are living in India. As I have done the discussion that it has been called Sepoy Mutiny by them and by us, First War of Independence. So there are various incidents, various events took place during that time, how colonizers are revealing that or throwing light on that, and how the colonized, they are expressing their views about that. So here is one example of massacre that took place in Jallianwala Bagh, and the person, the victim, is narrating this incident. This has not been narrated by the person who is the master. The novel deals with colonial discourse, decolonization struggles, nationhood, and other such post-colonial subjects. The novel is an autofiction. Autofiction is a form that combines two narratives, one autobiography and fiction. It is a form of fictionalized autobiography. The life details of Salman Rushdie is at time very much similar with Salim Sinai. So Salim Sinai, through the life of Salim Sinai, Salman Rushdie is revealing his own life. So autobiography is been not presented directly, but through a fictionalized characters. So through a homo fictus. It is an autofiction. It is a fictional autobiography. In it, the fictional character, using the first person narrative, I, tells his biography, his internal and external experiences. Fictional autobiography is self-written biography of a fictional character, as Daniel Defoe's Small Flanders, Charles Dickens' Great Expectation, where character Moll, Pip, they are revealing their own stories. So here Salim Sinai is telling about his own life. So it is a form of fictional autobiography. Autobiography as history. Salim Sinai, a common man, a person who works in a pickle factory. He tells about his life, and his life has become so significant that it works like history. So autobiography as history. Salim Sinai's life and his fate is intertwined with that of India's. His birth coincided precisely with that of modern India. Midnight on August 15, 1947, when the nation and Salim Sinai both came into existence. What follows is the intertwined stories of Salim and his country, as well as a meditation on the intersection of personal history and the historical record. History is told through the eyes of a common man, not a narration of a ruler or emperor or a general. Magic realism. It is a style of writing that incorporates paranormal proceedings into realistic narrative. Rushdie uses it in Midnight Children to blur the dissimilarity between fantasy and reality. Fantasy and reality, fact and fiction, truth and lie, trivial and significance profound, all are intermingled through the use of this magic realism. This is making the text an enthralling text. The drab, ironical, violent, sardonic events presented in the novel becomes interesting because of the use of magic realism. The use of fantastical elements create a sense of mystery and bring an interest in the text. Midnight Children is a dark, complex allegory of modern India, post-colonial India, projected through the tale of Salim Sinai in an allegorical way. Plenitude. The novel celebrates the plenitude of India in the postmodernist mode. The novel mirrors up Indian social political life, its poverty, its richness, the clashes, the riots which are taking place, the independence struggle and disturbance of the partition, social changes, crisis of distinctiveness, emerging experience of alienation and disorder. Plenitude is visible in every form of the novel, in characterization, in themes, in techniques, in various other aspects. Hybridity, mixture of different cultures, religions, races, languages. It is an important aspect of post-colonial text. Hybridity is defined as the combination and mixing of multiple seemingly opposing elements in a manner that maintains the various elements' characteristics. So different things are intermingled, elements are intermingled, but they are having their own characteristics as well as. Various elements' characteristics subvert and alter the characteristics of the other elements. Midnight Children remains the embodiment of hybridity because every aspect of the novel is imbued with the mixing and melding of various elements and characteristics. Rushdie uses the term hybridization to describe the generation of migrant identities which defy binary conceptions of self, another, center and margin, or dominance and submission. Metafiction, writing about writing, story about stories. Meta means about. So, it is about fiction. How to write fiction, create fiction, what are the chief components of fiction. In metafiction, authors often break out of the narrative to address the nature of what they are doing in the novel. Midnight Children is metafiction in that the book deals with itself as fiction, attempting to say something about a book itself. infusing his novel with the consciousness of the author's role and a curiosity about the constraints of storytelling. The constant interactions between Salim Sinai and Padma. Salim is narrating his story to the another worker working in the pickle factory, Padma. The constant interactions between Salim Sinai and Padma, causing interruptions in the narrative during the course of his recording his autobiography for the benefit of his son, with queries and objections from Padma and rectifications from Salim Sinai, explain the technique of metafiction. The interactions between Salim and Padma represent the interaction between the author and his critic, his audience. So Padma is here working like an audience. So here he is using reader response criticism, the element of reader response. So Padma is here a reader, an audience who is responding. Magic realism, plenitude, metafiction, pastage, all these are some features of postmodernist text. Related to postmodern intertextuality, pastage is been used here. Pastage means to combine, to paste together. A literary pastage and intertextuality is the chief feature of Midnight's Children. Rushdie here uses varieties of styles or imitates the work of other writers. He has been influenced by many writers and their works. He is influenced by Laurence Sterne's Tristram Shandy, which has been known as a precursor text in modernism. Gabriel Garcia Marquez' 100 Years of Solitude, Gunter Grass' The Tin Drum. Both the texts gave 100 Years of Solitude, The Tin Drum. Both the texts mix magical thinking with political reality. Apart from these texts, some techniques which he is using from these texts, he also in the text refers Ramayana, Mahabharata, Quran, Sadat Hasan Manto's short stories, Arabian Nights, Nehru's speeches, and a lot of newspaper accounts and many more things. He has used this text to criticize the post-Nehruvian period and the time period of Indira Gandhi. Politics is one of the major concerns of Rushdie's novel, and his Midnight's Children is no exception to this. Here, in this novel, he deals with the politics of India and Pakistan. Especially, he is criticizing the politics after independence, but he reacts to political events from a genuine humanistic angle. In this, he transcends beyond nationality, race, caste, creed, and cultural mix-up. Cinematic technique, use of the artistic conventions of modern Bollywood cinema. Rushdie's worldview and certainly his sense of the fantastical has been shaped by the films of his childhood. He is from Bombay. Bombay is famous for Bollywood film. His work shows an influence of Bollywood film industry. The Switched Babies. Salim has been switched by Shiva and Shiva has been switched by Salim. In Midnight's Children relate to the standard fare for a Bollywood Hindi film. But whereas the movies, while entertaining, are markedly mediocre, Midnight's Children is a masterpiece, brilliant written, wildly unpredictable, hilarious and heartbreaking in equal measure. The novel has political overtones. There are certain real historical incidents which are referred in the novel. The political upheaval and constant threat of violence that marked the first 3 decades of independence forms the backdrop for Midnight Children. It covers different periods of Indian history, such as the era of British rule, the struggle for independence, partition, the progress of two nations of India and of Pakistan, Indo-Pakistani wars, and Indian politics in the 1970s. The novel gives an account of the historical events that happened during British Raj and after independence. It is not the historical events which has been showing more importance, but it is the life history of Salim Sinai and how these events are affecting the life of a common man. The Rowlatt Act and the Amritsar massacre in 1919. Salim Sinai is having a kind of a fear that he will die very soon. He has this premonition, foreboding fear. So before his death, he wants to narrate his story. He is 30 years old and he begins the story near about 32 years before his birth. And what were the political events significant during that very time? It was a time when the World War was also taking place. The story begins in 1915 and talks about what is actually happening in India during that period. The Rowlatt Act and the Amritsar massacre in 1919, transfer of power in 1947, India was divided into India and Pakistan. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, his policies, 5-year plans, he has become so significant person that the era he has been known as a father of the nation. The era has been known as a Nehruvian period. The States Reorganization Act in 1956, Indo-Pakistani Air War. In 1947, torn apart by partition, Pakistan is divided into 2 separate countries with the east and west sections of Pakistan on either side of India. This division is taken even further when East and West Pakistan are reclassified as 2 separate countries, Pakistan and Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971, India's first nuclear test, which also was called Smiling Buddha in 1974, the event of emergency, 2 years, from 1975 to 1977, Indira Gandhi's emergency rule shows her lust for power and fear of insecurities. After Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the second important political figure was Indira Gandhi. And because of her lust for power and fear, she has declared after some time the emergency in India. Declaration of emergency was a dramatic turn in Indian political affairs. The democracy was brought to a grinding halt and all the fundamental rights and legal remedies protected by the Constitution of the Republic of India were suspended. Indira Gandhi tried to defend the emergency on the grounds that she was trying to protect the state and the Indian people. Nevertheless, her emergency rule faced immense criticism and is undoubtedly one of the most controversial periods of the political history of independent India. Sanjay Gandhi's cleansing of Jama Masjid slums and family planning steps. The subsequent sterilization and the civic beautification programs that we know about, whatever happened after the emergency, it brought a great uproar in India. The major political events are viewed through the consciousness of Salim Sinai. Salim Sinai is a victim of politics and he loses his entire family during the Indo-Pak War of 1971. Politics has deprived his identity and reduced him to a non-entity. He has lost his individuality. His moral courage is lacking something in opposing ruthless governments and dictators like Indira Gandhi. This alienates him from his own land and people. He feels that he is falling apart and may face his death in any moment. Thus, Midnight Children is Rushdie's devastating political satire and ceaseless entertainment. It also talks about the linguistic feud that resulted in the creation of Maharashtra. It presents the picture of language riots in Bombay leading to its bifurcation. First, India's integrity and entity was divided and attacked when India was partitioned into Pakistan and India. After independence, within India, language marches agitate for further partitions based upon linguistic lines. New nationalities are created, and with them come new forms of cultural identity that reflect the constant divisions. Through Salim Sinai, who is both a participant and witness to many of the above events directly, and through his telepathic powers to some of them indirectly, as he is able to skip back and forward through time. We also have critical reaction, anger and pain to some of the events affecting the people by and large, and especially Salim's team of Midnight Children. Salim gives his uninhibited criticism of some of the heavy political bigwigs who have tried to throttle the freedom of the nation and its people. So the novel has political overtones. Midnight Children intricately, means in a very complicated and detailed manner, interweaves two historical records. First, India's national history with Salim Sinai's familial history. Let's do the discussion of the plot. Plot is elaborate, non-linear, digressive, fantastic. The different patterns are weaved into a complex whole. It is divided into three parts or three books. The first book deals with Salim Sinai, recounting the events till his birth. This is like before his birth, which has also been said that this book which imagines the emergence of the nation. Book 2, Salim is recounting the various events of his childhood and adolescence till the death of his parents. Book 3 talks about the widow. Here he is referring Indira Gandhi and Salim Sinai. Salim's body is also an integral part in the telling of the story. His body disintegrates as when he is narrating the story. So disintegration of the body is symbolizing or indirect way saying about the disintegration of the nation. The novel begins with the story of Salim Sinai's family and the various events that lead to India's independence and eventually to partition. The book first is sort of a retelling of how the nation was imagined. Book 2 talks about Nehru as the mirror of the nation, and book 3 deals with emergency phase where India becomes Indra and Indra becomes India. Midnight Children follows Salim Sinai, the novel's narrator, and as he self-consciously explains his family history to the reader and to his listener Padma. The novel narrates key events in the history of India through the story of pickle factory worker Salim Sinai, one of 1001 children born as India won independence from Britain in 1947. While describing his grandfather and grandmother's personal history, Salim intertwines Indian history within his narrative. This combination of his own familial history and Indian history culminates in the moment of his birth. Born at precisely midnight, August 15, 1947, Salim echoes the birth of an independent India, which gained its independence from Great Britain at the same exact moment as Salim's birth. Thank you for listening me. I look forward to see you in the next session of this lecture. Thank you.